The LMS 2P was a 440 tender engine designed by Henry Fowler for light passenger work, and built at the former Midland Railway Works in Derby between 1928 and 1932. Personally, I reckon they looked somewhat old for engines built in the late 20s and early 30s, although I dare say that's due to their design essentially just being a slightly updated version of the Midland Railway 483 class, with reduced boiler mountings and different axle boxes. 138 examples of the 2P class were built, with the engines being numbered from 563 to 700. Incidentally, the 2P class leader wasn't the only British 440 to have the number 563. The Fowler 2Ps were successful locomotives, and could be found on former Glasgow and South Western Railway metals and other parts of the LMS network. A trio of 2Ps, numbers 575, 576 and 580, were allocated to the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway in 1928, renumbered as 44, 45 and 46 respectively, and received the elegant Prussian blue livery. However, this was very short-lived, as those 2Ps were taken back into LMS stock in 1930. They were renumbered as 633, 634 and 635, as their original numbers had been taken by new 2Ps built while the originals were on the S&D. All but two of the class survived into British Railways ownership, with 591 and 639 having been prematurely withdrawn in 1934 as a result of accident damage. The surviving 2Ps all had 40,000 added to their numbers, and kept going into at least the 1950s. Proper withdrawals began in 1954, when number 40662 bowed out, and by 1962 only 15 2Ps were still in service. Those were all gone by the end of 1962, and sadly, none of these locomotives have survived into preservation. Apparently, there was a proposal to build a new 2P at some point in the 90s, but that never came to fruition. The surviving U2 class, number 74 Dunluce Castle, over in Northern Ireland, is the nearest thing to a 2P that still exists today. This locomotive was brought to TS Classic by Caledonia Works and released in May 2025, thus making her a more recent add-on than what I initially thought. For some reason, I used to think that this was a 2023 or 2024 release. In any case, she's available from CW's website for £20, or around 45 New Zealand dollars. Apart from one exception, the 2Ps only ever wore black throughout their working lives, so the selection included with the CW pack is as follows. Two variants of LMS lined black, labelled as code B3 or code B5, LMS unlined black, code C21, Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway Prussian blue, BR unlined black, with either Gill Sans lettering, the early crest or the late crest, and BR lined black, with the same decal options as the unlined variant. Alongside all those liveries, you get three different variants of the Fowler tender. One with an S&D style tablet catcher, one with rivets and coal rails, and one with smooth sides and no coal rails. Considering the fact that the S&D is depicted in TS as being entirely double track south of Midford, I wonder why some of the 2P's tenders initially had tablet catchers. In any case, this locomotive uses Simnation's Locomotion 2.0 scripting, but she doesn't have the very latest features, such as posable gauge glasses, refillable sandboxes, and the scripted tender tank and water level, as those hadn't yet been introduced, and wouldn't arrive until later in 2025. As for what the 2P does have, this includes, but is certainly not limited to, a customizable headlamp arrangement on both the locomotive and tender, with appropriate LMS or BR lamps depending on the variant, a good selection of cab camera views, fluctuating boiler water level depending on the route gradient, Performance Mode Pro, realistic steam chest simulation, fire intensity synchronized with the exhaust beat, and animated valve gear inside the frames. As for the modelling, this is done to the usual high standard that you can expect from Mr. Wilson, although my eyes might be playing tricks on me, because I swear the smoke box looks a little too big, although in saying that, I could be completely wrong. In any case, the texturing is similarly well done to the overall model, and I particularly like how the brasswork looks. I think the 2P is one engine on which it's especially important to not let the fire mass get too far above the ideal level quoted in the manual. In this case, it's 900 to 910 pounds. Due to the advanced boiler heating system, as is a standard feature on modern CW products, it's a good idea to sit idle for a few minutes at the start of a scenario, be that standard, free roam, quick drive, or whatever, and let the boiler warm up. Otherwise the locomotive's steaming abilities could be subpar, as opposed to sub-new key. When I'm driving a steam locomotive in TS, I usually leave the dampers open the whole time, and the 2P is no exception. For reference, you open the dampers with M and close them with Shift M. I remember seeing some real photographs that showed 2Ps running on the Somerset and Dorset line well into the British Railways era, so that led me to think that they would be decent hill climbers in TS. And indeed they are, provided that they're not pulling too heavy a load, and that you do your best to maintain boiler pressure. The 2P can easily reach close to 60 miles per hour in the right circumstances, and when I tried driving number 590 from Castle Douglas to Newton Stewart, for Random Thoughts 10, I found that the engine was happy with the reverser set at 36% cutoff, as marked on the F4 heads-up display, although I often had to adjust the regulator and reverser when necessary. Sometimes, CW engines are set up in a way where you can just press J for both opening and closing the vacuum brake ejector, but in the case of the 2P, you need to press Shift J to close the ejector, and J to open. To add, I wouldn't recommend hauling more than 6 coaches behind one of these locomotives. As for anything else I'd like to say about this engine before moving on to the conclusion, for one thing, I reckon she's got a really nice exhaust bark, particularly when she's starting away from stationary. The sound set is generally good, although, in my opinion at least, the chuff loops are a bit iffy around 28 miles per hour. At lower speeds, around 15 to 25, I swear I can hear the locomotive make a soft wheezing noise of sorts. The wheezing reminds me of Duke when he tried to pull the picnic train, but ended up needing assistance from Stewart and Falcon. I may not know which locomotive's sounds were used on the 2P, but I can still appreciate the work done by Ash of Vulcan Productions. Meanwhile, you can open the roof vent, but not the cabside doors or the windows above the firebox. As this engine was released prior to the Highland Railway Strath class, she doesn't need her reverser lock engaged the whole time when you're moving the reverser. Instead, you just need to press E once to engage or disengage the reverser lock. That still catches me out sometimes, now that I'm quite well accustomed to CW locomotives released after the Strath. Something that I've forgotten to mention this whole time are the quick drive consists and their requirements. In the case of the 2P, only 2 packs, namely CW's LMS Princess Royal and Armstrong Powerhouse's Mark I Coach Pack Volume 1, are required for the quick drive consists. The Princess Royal includes a good selection of Period 3 coaches in both LMS and BR guises. All things considered, I'm of the opinion that CW's depiction of the LMS Fowler 2P is still a pretty solid pack for what it is, with the aforementioned high standard of modelling and texturing, alongside an overall decent sound set and an amount of variation that suits me fine. My only critiques are those aforementioned iffy chuffing sounds at 28, as well as the lack of animation on the reverser rod and inability to move the camera around when you're in these cab views looking directly out the front windows on either side of the footplate. Part of me wishes that there was a fictional Crimson Lake variant included, but that livery's absence from the pack is not the end of the world, so I won't lose any sleep over it. If you're interested in recreating authentic scenes on the Somerset and Dorset Railway, or just want a medium-sized tender engine for passenger work, or whatever else you might like to do with a locomotive of this power rating, then the 2P could be up your alley. In my opinion, this pack deserves a 7.5 out of 10, and if you've stuck around to the end of the video, you win breathing organs for fish that came from a city in the deep south of New Zealand. It's the Invercar Gills.